Captain Elena Vasquez stared at the crimson warning lights flashing across her ship's bridge as the Terran vessel Redemption drifted through the debris field that had once been the mining station Kepler-7. The twisted metal fragments told a story she'd heard too many times before: another human outpost destroyed by the Zephyrian Empire's relentless expansion. "Captain, I'm detecting a single life sign in Sector 7, reported Lieutenant Chen from his scanner station. It's faint, but definitely there." Elena's jaw tightened. 3 months ago, her younger brother Marcus had been stationed on Kepler-7 as part of the mining operations security detail. The official report stated no survivors, but Elena had refused to accept that conclusion. She'd taken leave from her regular patrol duties and spent her own credits to outfit a search and rescue mission. "Take us closer, but keep weapons ready," she ordered. "If there's someone alive out there after 3 weeks, they might not be friendly." The Redemption was a modified cargo hauler, nothing fancy, but Elena had equipped it with military-grade shields and a small complement of defensive weapons. Her crew consisted of volunteers, former military personnel who understood the pain of losing someone to the Zephyrian war machine. As they approached the coordinates, Elena's breath caught in her throat. Floating among the wreckage was a Zephyrian fighter craft, its distinctive white hull gleaming like polished ivory despite obvious battle damage. The ship's design was unlike anything in the standard Imperial fleet, sleek where Zephyrian vessels were typically angular, elegant where they were brutally functional. "That's our life sign source," Chen confirmed. "Single occupant, still breathing but vitals are weak." Elena felt her hands clench into fists. A Zephyrian pilot had survived the destruction of Kepler-7. The same species that had killed her brother now sat helpless in a damaged fighter, waiting for rescue or death. Every instinct screamed at her to leave the alien to die in the cold vacuum of space. "Captain?" Chen's voice brought her back to the present. "Orders?" For a long moment, Elena stared at the enemy vessel. The rational part of her mind knew that capturing a Zephyrian pilot could provide valuable intelligence. The emotional part wanted revenge for Marcus, for the thousands of humans who had died in this senseless conflict. "Prepare the docking bay," she said finally. "We're bringing them aboard." "Ma'am?" Sergeant Torres, her security chief, looked surprised. "Are you sure that's wise?" "We'll take precautions," Elena replied. "Full containment protocols. But we're not leaving anyone to die out here, even if they are Zephyrian." The docking operation took careful maneuvering. The alien fighter was small enough to fit in the Redemption's cargo bay, but its unusual design made securing it a challenge. Elena watched from the observation deck as her crew used magnetic clamps and securing cables to lock the ivory-colored ship in place. "Atmospheric readings show the cockpit is pressurized, but the pilot's suit is damaged," reported Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the mission's medical officer. "We need to extract them quickly if we want to keep them alive." Elena suited up and entered the cargo bay with Torres and 2 other security personnel. Up close, the Zephyrian fighter was even more beautiful than it appeared from a distance. The hull wasn't just white, it had an almost pearl-like quality that seemed to shift and shimmer in the artificial lighting. "Never seen a Zephyrian design like this," Torres muttered through his comm system. "Usually their ships look like flying weapons. This one looks like art." Elena approached the cockpit canopy, which had been damaged by what appeared to be weapons fire. Through the cracks in the transparent aluminum, she could see the pilot unconscious, wearing a flight suit that matched the ship's ivory coloring. But something was wrong with the picture. Zephyrians were typically 7 feet tall with gray skin and angular features. This pilot appeared much smaller and more delicate. "Dr. Tanaka, can you get a medical scan through the canopy?" Elena asked. "Already on it," came the reply. "Captain, this is interesting. The life form reads as Zephyrian, but there are some unusual variations in the biological markers. Could be a subspecies we haven't encountered before." Elena made the decision quickly. "Torres, help me get this canopy open." Carefully. It took nearly an hour to safely extract the unconscious pilot. When they finally lifted the figure from the cockpit, Elena was shocked by what she saw. The Zephyrian was indeed much smaller than typical for their species, perhaps 5.5 feet tall at most. The flight suit, when carefully removed in the medical bay, revealed delicate features and pale blue skin that was almost white. Female, Dr. Tanaka confirmed after completing her initial examination. Young, probably equivalent to early 20s in human terms. She's severely dehydrated and suffering from mild radiation exposure, but nothing life-threatening if we treat her properly. Elena stared down at the unconscious alien. This wasn't the brutal enemy warrior she'd expected. This looked like someone barely out of adolescence who had somehow ended up alone in a damaged fighter surrounded by the wreckage of a human mining station. Captain, Chen's voice crackled over the intercom. I've been analyzing the fighter's computer systems. It's heavily encrypted, but I've managed to extract some basic flight data. This ship wasn't part of the attack on Kepler 7. Explain. The timestamps show this fighter arrived in the system 6 days after the mining station was destroyed. Based on the flight path data, it came from the direction of contested space, the border region between Zephyrian and human territory. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying this pilot was investigating the attack site? That's what the evidence suggests. And, Captain, there's something else. The fighter's weapon systems show no signs of recent use. The damage to the hull appears to be from incoming fire, not return fire. Someone shot at this ship, and the pilot never fired back. Dr. Tanaka looked up from her patient. Elena, I think you should see this. She activated a holographic display showing the results of her detailed medical scan. This Zephyrian has several old injuries, fractures that healed incorrectly, evidence of malnutrition during development, and something else. Look at these scarring patterns on her back and shoulders. Elena studied the images, her expression growing grim. Those look like whip marks. That's exactly what they are. And they're old, probably from childhood. This individual has been severely abused at some point in her life. The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. Everything she thought she knew about their prisoner was wrong. This wasn't an enemy warrior or spy. This was someone who had clearly suffered, someone who had arrived at Kepler 7 after the attack and had been shot at without fighting back. Doctor, how long until she regains consciousness? A few hours at most. The sedation is wearing off, and her body is responding well to treatment. Elena made a decision that would have seemed impossible when she first detected the life sign in the wreckage. When she wakes up, I want to talk to her. Alone. Captain, I strongly advise against, Torres began. Noted and overruled, Elena cut him off. Post guards outside the medical bay, but I need to understand what happened here. And, Sergeant, treat her as a rescued survivor, not a prisoner. Something tells me there's a lot more to this story. As the Redemption continued its drift through the Kepler 7 debris field, Elena found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about the war between humanity and the Zephyrian Empire. The unconscious pilot in their medical bay represented something she hadn't expected to find: evidence that not all enemies were what they seemed. Dr. Tanaka continued her treatment, carefully rehydrating the patient and treating the radiation exposure with standard protocols that seemed to work as well on Zephyrian physiology as they did on humans. The similarities were striking: both species were bipedal, both breathed oxygen, both had similar cardiovascular systems. It's remarkable how compatible our medical techniques are, Dr. Tanaka observed as she worked. Almost like we evolved from similar origins, despite being from different star systems. Elena nodded absently, her attention focused on preparing for the conversation that would come when their guest awakened. She'd spent her entire military career fighting Zephyrians, viewing them as implacable enemies bent on human destruction. But, looking at the peaceful face of the young pilot, she found herself wondering how much of that perspective had been shaped by propaganda rather than reality. The ship's computer chimed softly. Captain, Chen's voice came over the intercom. I've made additional progress on the fighter's data systems. You're going to want to see this. Elena left the medical bay and made her way to the bridge, where Chen had multiple displays showing Zephyrian text alongside computer translations. What am I looking at? She asked. Personal log entries from our guest, Chen replied. The translation software isn't perfect, but I've managed to piece together some key information. Her name is Kira Th, roughly translates to White Wing in Standard Zephyrian. But, Captain, she's not Imperial military. Then, what is she? Chen highlighted a section of translated text. Near as I can tell, she's some kind of independent operator. The logs mention searching for truth, investigating Imperial actions that she describes as shameful. She came to Kepler-7 specifically to document what happened here. Elena read through the translated logs, her understanding of the situation shifting with each entry. Kira Th wrote about her horror at learning of the attack on the mining station, her determination to gather evidence of what she called war crimes against innocent beings, and her growing disillusionment with the imperial government she had once served. There's more, Chen continued. She mentions other incidents, imperial attacks on civilian targets, cover-ups of atrocities, attempts to silence anyone who questioned military actions. Captain, I think our guest is some kind of Zephyrian whistleblower. The pieces were falling into place. Kira Th had come to Kepler-7 not as an enemy, but as someone seeking justice for the humans who had died there. Someone had tried to stop her, most likely Imperial forces who didn't want their crimes documented. Elena felt the weight of decision pressing down on her. Everything she'd planned to do when she found survivors of Kepler-7 had been based on the assumption that those survivors would be human. She'd never imagined she would rescue someone from the species responsible for her brother's death, much less someone who might be trying to expose the truth about that death. A soft chime from the medical bay announced that their guest was beginning to regain consciousness. Elena took a deep breath and prepared to face the most important conversation of her life, one that would determine not just the fate of Kira Th, but possibly the future of human-Zephyrian relations. As she walked back toward the medical bay, Elena realized that her mission to find the truth about what happened to Marcus had taken an unexpected turn. Instead of finding her brother, she'd found someone who might help her understand why he died, and whether his death could have meaning beyond mere tragedy. The young Zephyrian pilot represented something Elena had never thought possible: hope for a future where the two species might find common ground. But, first, she had to convince Kira Th that not all humans were the enemy, just as Kira Th would have to convince Elena that not all Zephyrians deserved her hatred. Dr. Tanaka met Elena at the medical bay entrance. She's conscious and stable. Vitals are good, and she seems alert. But, Elena, be careful. We don't know how she'll react to finding herself aboard a human vessel. Elena nodded and entered the medical bay, where Kira Th was struggling to sit up on the examination table. When she saw Elena, the young Zephyrian froze, her large amber eyes wide with what appeared to be fear rather than hostility. For a moment, neither spoke. Elena found herself struck by how young and vulnerable Kira Th appeared, nothing like the fearsome warriors humanity had been taught to fear. This was just a frightened individual who had nearly died alone in the void of space. Finally, Elena broke the silence. "You're safe," she said simply. "No one here will hurt you." Kira Th's mouth moved as if she were trying to speak, but no sound emerged. Elena realized the pilot might not understand English, but then, Kira Th managed to whisper a single word in accented but clear English: "Why?" It was a question that would shape everything that followed. Why had humans saved her? Why was she being shown kindness by people who should have been her enemies? Why had everything she thought she knew about this war turned out to be wrong? Elena pulled up a chair and sat down, deliberately positioning herself at eye level with Kira Th rather than looming over her. "Because leaving you to die would have been wrong," she said. "And because I think we need to talk." Kira Th's amber eyes studied Elena's face with an intensity that made the human captain uncomfortable. The young Zephyrian had been awake for 2 days now, and their conversations had revealed truths that challenged everything both species believed about each other. "Your brother Marcus," Kira Th said in her careful English, "he was security chief at Kepler-7, yes? I found his personnel records in the station database before the Imperial destroyers arrived." Elena's breath caught. "You knew about Marcus?" "I studied all the personnel files. I needed to understand who died there, who the Empire murdered for their mining resources." Kira Th's voice carried a weight of sadness that transcended species barriers. Marcus Vasquez, age 24, enlisted to pay for his sister's medical training. He sent most of his wages home to support family on Earth Colony New Angeles. The accuracy of those details hit Elena like a physical blow. She hadn't told Kira Th any of that information, which meant the Zephyrian had indeed been at Kepler 7 investigating the attack. How do you know about the medical training? His personal quarters contained letters to medical schools, scholarship applications. He was proud of you, wrote about Captain Elena often. Kira Th paused, seeming to gather courage. There is something else. Something I found at the station that you must know. Elena leaned forward, her heart racing. What? Kira Th reached into the bag of personal effects that Dr. Tanaka had retrieved from her fighter. From it, she withdrew a small recording device, human technology, scorched but intact. I found this in the security office. The final transmission from Kepler 7. Elena's hands trembled as she accepted the device. For 3 months, she'd wondered about Marcus's final moments. Official reports claimed the attack had been swift, that the mining station's personnel had no warning. But, if this device contained Marcus's final transmission, I can translate the parts in Zephyrian, Kira Th offered quietly. Your brother spoke with Imperial Commander Vextar before the attack. It was not what your people were told. Elena activated the recording device. Static filled the medical bay, followed by Marcus's familiar voice speaking in urgent tones. This is Kepler 7 security to any Terran vessel in range. We are under approach by Zephyrian Imperial forces. Commander is requesting complete evacuation of the mining station. Repeat, they want us to leave peacefully. The recording continued, and Elena heard her brother's confusion as he relayed communications from the approaching Imperial fleet. The Zephyrians weren't demanding surrender, they were offering safe passage for all human personnel if the station was abandoned within 12 hours. Then, came voices speaking in the musical Zephyrian language. Kira Th translated in real time. Imperial Commander says the mining operation violates territorial agreements. But, he offers safe transport to nearest human outpost. No need for violence if humans withdraw peacefully. Elena stared at the recording device in disbelief. They offered to let everyone leave? Yes, Kira Th confirmed. But, listen to what comes next. Marcus's voice returned, now speaking to someone else in the security office. Corporate oversight is refusing evacuation. They're ordering us to hold position and fight. Says the mining contract is too valuable to abandon. A pause, then, I don't care what the contract says, I'm ordering evacuation of non-essential personnel. The recording captured the next several hours as Marcus organized an evacuation effort against direct orders from the Kepler Mining Consortium. Elena heard her brother's voice growing increasingly strained as he tried to convince the corporate representatives to prioritize human lives over profit margins. Then, came the moment that changed everything. A new voice, cold and authoritative. Security Chief Vasquez, you are relieved of duty for insubordination. All personnel will remain at their posts. We have reinforcements en route. Sir, the Zephyrians are giving us 12 hours to evacuate, Marcus protested. We can get everyone out safely. The evacuation order is countermanded. Kepler 7 will not be surrendered to alien forces. Kira Th's translation continued as Zephyrian voices returned to the recording. Imperial Commander extends evacuation deadline to 18 hours. He detects human children on the station and wishes no harm to young ones. Elena's vision blurred with tears. The Zephyrians had detected the mining families, the engineers and technicians who brought their children to the remote posting. The Imperial Commander had been trying to prevent civilian casualties. The recording's final section was hardest to hear. Marcus's voice, now desperate, this is Chief Vasquez to all station personnel. Corporate has locked down the transport bays, but I've found an emergency exit route through cargo hold 7. Families with children move to that position immediately. We're getting you out whether corporate approves or not. Then, came the weapons fire. The recording captured the moment when corporate security forces tried to stop the evacuation. Marcus and his team fought their own people to save civilian lives, while overhead, the Zephyrian fleet waited patiently for the evacuation deadline to expire. The final transmission came 18 hours after the first warning. This is Commander Vextar to Kepler-7. Evacuation deadline has passed. We detect continued human presence on the station. We regret what must follow. Even then, the Zephyrian commander had sounded genuinely remorseful about the attack. The recording captured the first missile impacts, then, Marcus's final words: "Elena, if you ever hear this, remember that sometimes the enemy isn't who they tell you it is. The real monsters wear human faces and count profits over lives." The recording ended in static. Elena sat in stunned silence, processing the reality that everything she'd believed about her brother's death was wrong. Marcus hadn't died in a surprise attack by bloodthirsty aliens. He died trying to protect civilians from corporate greed, killed by weapons fired by people who put mining profits ahead of human lives. "I am sorry," Kirish said softly. "I know this truth is painful. But, you deserved to know." Elena wiped tears from her cheeks. "The corporate security forces, they're the ones who killed my brother?" "Yes." Commander Vextar filed a complete report with Imperial Command. He requested permission to rescue human survivors, but his superiors denied the request. They said letting humans live would set dangerous precedent for future territorial disputes. The full picture was becoming clear. Marcus had died as a hero, trying to save innocent lives. The Zephyrian commander had tried to prevent civilian casualties but was overruled by his own superiors. And the corporate executives had been willing to sacrifice everyone on Kepler-7 to protect their mining contract. "Kirish, why were you investigating this? Why risk your life to uncover the truth?" The young Zephyrian was quiet for a long moment. Then, she began to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "My father was Commander Vextar." Elena felt the world shift around her. The pilot she'd rescued was the daughter of the Zephyrian who had ordered the attack on Kepler-7. But, instead of hatred, Elena found herself feeling something else entirely: a deep sadness for this young woman who carried the weight of her father's unwilling role in the tragedy. "He came home broken after Kepler-7, Kirish continued. He told me about the humans who died, about the commander who fought his own people to save children. My father resigned his commission rather than carry out more such orders. Imperial Command declared him a traitor." "What happened to him?" "Executed for refusing to attack a human medical station 6 months ago. His final words were that the Empire had forgotten honor in pursuit of conquest." Kirish's voice strengthened with resolve. "I took his personal fighter and began investigating Imperial war crimes. I want to prove that many Zephyrians oppose this senseless killing." Elena understood now why Kirish had been shot at when she arrived at Kepler-7. Imperial forces were trying to prevent her from uncovering evidence that contradicted the official narrative of the attack. They wanted humans to believe that Zephyrians were monsters incapable of mercy, just as they wanted their own people to believe humans were aggressive invaders who deserved no quarter. "How many other incidents have you investigated?" Elena asked. 17 different attacks over the past year. In every case, Imperial forces offered terms for peaceful resolution. In every case, human corporate or military leadership chose violence over compromise. And, in every case, civilians suffered while the powerful counted their profits. Kirish activated a holographic display from her personal computer, showing Elena documentation from multiple incidents. Images of destroyed human outposts, Zephyrian diplomatic communications offering peaceful solutions, and corporate messages prioritizing resource extraction over human lives. "This war is being prolonged deliberately," Kirish explained. "There are those on both sides who profit from conflict. Arms manufacturers, territorial expansion groups, resource extraction companies. They need humans and Zephyrians to hate each other." Elena studied the evidence with growing horror and understanding. The war that had claimed her brother's life wasn't a clash of incompatible civilizations. It was a manufactured conflict designed to benefit a small group of powerful individuals on both sides. "What were you planning to do with this information?" "Find someone who would listen. Someone with enough influence to expose the truth." Kira TH looked directly at Elena. Your military record shows you have connections with Terran Command. And, now you have proof that your brother died protecting innocents, not fighting aliens. Elena realized that Kira TH was offering her something incredible, the chance to give Marcus's death meaning beyond tragedy. If this evidence could be presented to the right people, it might prevent future incidents like Kepler-7. Dr. Tanaka entered the medical bay with her daily assessment data. How's our patient doing? She asked, then paused as she sensed the tension in the room. Is everything all right? Dr. Tanaka, Elena said slowly, I need you to verify the authenticity of some recordings. And then, I need you to help me figure out how to get this information to people who can act on it. What kind of recordings? Elena held up the device containing Marcus's final transmission. The kind that could end a war. Over the next several hours, Dr. Tanaka worked with the ship's computer systems to verify the authenticity of both the human recording and Kira TH's Zephyrian evidence. The timestamps matched, the communication protocols were accurate, and the technical details checked out perfectly. This is genuine, Dr. Tanaka confirmed. And, if what it suggests is true, then, we need to get this information to Terran Command immediately. Elena nodded, but her mind was racing with the complications. The problem is that some people in Terran Command might be part of the problem. If corporate interests are driving this conflict, they'll have allies in the military hierarchy. Then, we go around them, Dr. Tanaka suggested. There are independent journalists, civilian oversight committees, even some military officers known for their integrity. Kira TH spoke up from her position on the medical table. There is another option. On Zephyrian side, there is resistance movement. Military officers and civilians who oppose the war. If we could make contact. Elena considered the possibilities. Working with Zephyrian resistance fighters would be considered treason by some, but if it could prevent future tragedies like Kepler-7, didn't she have a moral obligation to try? Kira TH, these resistance fighters, how do we know they can be trusted? Because they have already lost everything fighting for peace. My father's unit included 12 officers who refused to attack civilian targets. All were executed or exiled. Their families were stripped of rank and resources. They have nothing left to gain except honor. Elena made her decision. Then, we're going to try something that's probably insane. We're going to find these Zephyrian resistance fighters, and we're going to work together to expose the truth about this war. Dr. Tanaka looked concerned. Elena, if Terran Command discovers you're collaborating with Zephyrians, they'll court-martial me for treason, Elena finished. But, if we do nothing, more people like Marcus will die for corporate profits. I won't let my brother's sacrifice be meaningless. Kira TH struggled to sit up straighter. Captain Vasquez, there is something else you must understand. If we attempt this, both our peoples will consider us traitors. We will be hunted by Imperial forces and human military alike. Then, we'd better make sure we succeed quickly, Elena replied. Because once we start down this path, there's no going back. She activated the ship's intercom system. All hands, this is the captain. Report to the main conference room in 1 hour. We're changing our mission parameters. Elena looked at Kira TH, this young Zephyrian who had lost her father to the same forces that killed Marcus. Two people from enemy species, brought together by tragedy and united by a determination to prevent others from suffering the same losses. Are you sure you want to do this? Elena asked. Once we start working together, we'll both be considered enemies by our own people. Kira TH's amber eyes showed no hesitation. My father died believing peace was possible. Your brother died protecting innocence. If we do not act, their deaths mean nothing. I would rather be a traitor to a corrupt empire than a loyal servant to murderers. Elena felt a smile cross her face for the first time since learning about Marcus's death. Then, let's go change the course of a war. As she prepared to brief her crew on their new mission, Elena reflected on how much had changed since they'd detected that single life sign in the Kepler-7 debris field. She'd come looking for her brother and found something even more valuable, hope for a future where humans and Zephyrians could work together instead of destroying each other. The Ivory Dragon had chosen mercy over vengeance, and, in doing so, had shown Elena a path toward honoring her brother's memory in the most meaningful way possible. Now she had to convince her crew to follow that path, knowing it would make them all fugitives from the very governments they had sworn to serve. 3 weeks later, the Redemption hung in space at the coordinates Kira Th had provided, waiting for contact with the Zephyrian resistance. Elena's crew had taken the news about their mission change better than expected, particularly after hearing Marcus's final transmission. Every member had lost someone to the war, and, learning that those deaths might have been preventable had strengthened their resolve. Contact on long-range sensors, Lieutenant Chen reported. Single vessel, Zephyrian configuration but, broadcasting the identification codes Kira Th provided. Elena felt her pulse quicken. This was the moment of truth. Either they were about to make contact with allies who could help expose the conspiracy behind the war, or they were walking into a trap that would end with their capture or death. Kira Th, you're certain about these resistance fighters? The young Zephyrian pilot, now recovered enough to serve as their liaison, nodded confidently. Commander Thuraven lost her entire family when Imperial forces attacked a peace negotiation. She has been gathering evidence of war crimes for 2 years. If anyone can be trusted, it is her. The approaching vessel was unlike any Zephyrian ship Elena had encountered. Where Imperial vessels were stark white and angular, this one had been modified with curved hull sections and decorative markings that spoke of individual creativity rather than military standardization. They're hailing us, Chen announced. Put them through, audio only for now, Elena ordered. A female voice speaking accented English came through the communications system. Human vessel Redemption, this is Commander Thuraven of the free ship Truthseeker. We come to honor the memory of Commander Vextar and seek justice for the innocent. Elena exchanged glances with Kira Th, who smiled sadly at the mention of her father's name. This is Captain Elena Vasquez. We have information you need to see. And, we have allies you need to meet, came the reply. Captain Vasquez, are you prepared for visual contact? Some of your species find our appearance disturbing. We'll manage, Elena replied, nodding to Chen to open the visual channel. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of the Zephyrian vessel. Commander Thuraven was typical for her species, tall, with pale gray skin and angular features, but her demeanor was completely different from Imperial officers Elena had encountered in combat. Where Imperial Zephyrians projected cold authority, Thuraven radiated warmth and intelligence. Captain Vasquez, Thuraven said, it is an honor to meet someone willing to seek truth despite the risks. Kira Th has told me about your brother and his heroic actions at Kepler-7. Commander, we have evidence that this war is being deliberately prolonged by interests on both sides, Elena replied. But, we need help getting that evidence to people who can act on it. Then, you will be pleased to know that you are not alone in this effort. Thuraven gestured to someone off-screen. There are others who share your commitment to peace. Elena was shocked when a human figure stepped into view on the Zephyrian bridge. The man wore a modified Terran uniform with resistance markings, and his face was familiar from military briefings. Captain Vasquez, I'm Colonel David Park, formerly of the Terran Strategic Command. I've been working with Commander Thuraven for 8 months to document the conspiracy behind this conflict. Elena stared in amazement. Colonel Park had been reported killed in action 6 months ago during a classified mission. Sir, you're supposed to be dead. I was supposed to be silenced, Park replied grimly. I discovered evidence that certain elements within Terran Command have been sabotaging peace negotiations. When I tried to report it through proper channels, they arranged an accident during my next mission. Commander Thuraven's people rescued me from the wreckage. The implications were staggering. If someone of Colonel Park's rank and reputation had been targeted for assassination by his own command structure, the conspiracy was deeper and more dangerous than Elena had imagined. Colonel, what kind of evidence did you uncover? Communications between Terran military leadership and corporate executives, coordinating attacks on Zephyrian civilian targets to prevent peace talks. Orders to suppress evidence of Zephyrian diplomatic overtures. Financial records showing massive payments from arms manufacturers to key military officials. Park's expression hardened. Captain, this war is being kept alive by people who profit from the killing. Commander Thraven stepped forward. The situation is similar within the Zephyrian Empire. We have documented communications between Imperial Command and territorial expansion corporations, orders to reject human peace offers, and evidence of attacks on our own people who advocate for negotiation. Elena felt the full scope of the conspiracy beginning to emerge. You're saying there are factions on both sides working together to prevent peace? Not working together directly, Colonel Park clarified. But their interests align. Human arms manufacturers and Zephyrian expansion corporations both need the war to continue. They've infiltrated their respective governments and military commands to ensure that any attempt at peace fails. Kira Th spoke up from beside Elena. This is why my father was executed. He discovered communications between Imperial Command and the expansion corporations. When he threatened to expose them, they eliminated him and blamed it on human espionage. Commander Thraven's expression softened as she looked at Kira Th. Your father was a true hero, young one. His sacrifice gave us the evidence we needed to understand how deep the corruption goes. Elena's mind was racing with possibilities. What exactly are you proposing we do with this information? We're planning a coordinated revelation, Colonel Park explained. Simultaneous release of evidence to independent journalists, civilian oversight committees, and reform-minded military officers on both sides. The goal is to expose the conspiracy before those involved can suppress the information. That's going to require precise timing, Elena observed. And we'll need to protect our sources. Once this information goes public, everyone involved in gathering it becomes a target. Commander Thraven activated a holographic display showing a complex timeline. We have been preparing for 3 months. We have contacts within independent media organizations, civilian oversight groups, and military reform movements on both sides. The revelation is scheduled to occur simultaneously across 12 different platforms in 6 days. Elena studied the plan, impressed by its scope and coordination. What do you need from us? Your evidence about Kepler-7 is crucial because it shows how the conspiracy works in practice, Colonel Park replied. But we also need you to serve as a symbol. A human captain who chose mercy over vengeance, who saved a Zephyrian life despite personal reasons for hatred. Your story demonstrates that ordinary people from both species can work together. Elena felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. You want us to go public with our cooperation? Yes, Thraven confirmed. Captain Vasquez and Kira Th working together despite everything that should have made them enemies. Your example proves that peace between our peoples is possible. Elena looked at Kira Th, who nodded encouragingly. Captain, my father believed that individual acts of courage could change the course of history. Perhaps he was right. Dr. Tanaka, who had been listening to the conversation, spoke up. Elena, there's something else to consider. If this plan succeeds, you'll be famous. Every detail of your background will be scrutinized. Are you prepared for that level of attention? Elena thought about Marcus, about his final transmission, about his determination to save innocent lives even when his own command structure opposed him. My brother died trying to do the right thing when it mattered most. I can't do any less. Colonel Park smiled. Then, we have an alliance. Captain, are you ready to help us end this war? Tell me what needs to happen. Over the next several hours, Elena and her crew worked with the resistance fighters to coordinate their part of the revelation plan. The evidence they had gathered would be released simultaneously with documentation from 17 other incidents, creating an overwhelming case against the conspiracy. But, as the plan took shape, Elena realized they faced a fundamental challenge. Once the information went public, they would all become fugitives from their respective governments. The conspiracy would strike back, and strike hard. Commander Thraven, Elena asked during a private moment in the planning session, what happens to us after the revelation? We'll be branded as traitors by both sides. There is a place prepared, Thraven replied. A hidden colony where humans and Zephyrians work together in secret. It was established 2 years ago as a refuge for those who seek peace despite official hostility. You would be welcome there. Elena considered the implications. Exile from human space, life as a fugitive, but the chance to build something new with people who shared her values. And if the revelation fails? If the conspiracy manages to suppress the information? Then, we will have tried, Kira Th interjected, joining the conversation. Sometimes the attempt itself matters, regardless of the outcome. My father taught me that honor comes from doing what is right, not from achieving victory. Colonel Park approached their group. Captain, there's one more thing you should know. We've received intelligence that Imperial Command is planning a major offensive against human colonies in the Centauri system. The attack is scheduled to begin immediately after the revelation, designed to provoke a massive human military response that will make peace impossible. Elena felt a chill of understanding. They're going to use our revelation as a distraction. While everyone is focused on the conspiracy evidence, they'll launch the largest attack of the war. Exactly, Park confirmed. Which means we need to do more than just reveal the conspiracy. We need to prevent that attack. Commander Tharavan nodded grimly. We have contacts within the Imperial fleet assigned to the Centauri operation. Some of the officers involved are sympathetic to our cause, but they cannot openly refuse orders without evidence to justify their actions. Elena saw the opportunity immediately. The evidence we're about to release, could it be transmitted directly to the Imperial fleet? If the officers involved understand they're being used by the conspiracy. Some might refuse to attack civilian targets, Tharavan agreed. But it would be extremely dangerous for them. The conspiracy has agents throughout the fleet command structure. Kira Th stepped forward with sudden determination. I should return to the Imperial fleet. As Vextar's daughter, some officers will listen to me. If I can reach them with the evidence. Absolutely not, Elena said immediately. They'll execute you the moment you set foot on an Imperial vessel. You're already considered a traitor for investigating the war crimes. Then, I will die for something worthwhile, Kira Th replied calmly. Better that than hiding while innocents are slaughtered in my name. Elena found herself facing a moment that would define the rest of her life. Kira Th was right, someone needed to reach the Imperial fleet before they attacked the Centauri colonies. But, letting this brave young Zephyrian sacrifice herself felt like a betrayal of everything they were trying to accomplish. There's another way, Elena said slowly. We go together. Not to the Imperial fleet, they'd kill us both. But, to Centauri. If we can warn the colonies and help them prepare defenses, maybe we can make the attack costly enough that even the conspiracy thinks twice. Colonel Park shook his head. Captain, the Centauri defense forces are minimal. Even with warning, they couldn't stop a full Imperial battle fleet. They don't have to stop it, Elena replied, her tactical mind working through possibilities. They just have to make it look like a defensive action rather than an unprovoked attack. If the colonies are obviously prepared for defense when the Imperial fleet arrives, it undermines the narrative that this is a surprise offensive. Commander Tharavan considered the proposal. It is risky, but it might work. Especially if we can coordinate the warning with the evidence revelation. The combination of preparation and exposure might force both sides to step back from escalation. Elena felt the plan crystallizing in her mind. We split our forces. Colonel Park and Commander Tharavan handled the evidence revelation from the hidden colony. Kira Th and I take the redemption to Centauri and help coordinate the defense. If everything goes according to schedule, the conspiracy gets exposed at the same time the colonies demonstrate they're ready to defend themselves. And if something goes wrong? Dr. Tanaka asked quietly. Elena looked around at the faces of people who had become more than allies, they had become family. Humans and Zephyrians working together despite everything their respective societies had taught them about each other. If something goes wrong, then at least we'll have tried to honor the memory of everyone who died because of this senseless war, Elena replied. Marcus, Commander Vexstar, and thousands of others who never got the chance to see their people work together instead of destroying each other. Kira Th placed a hand on Elena's shoulder, the first physical contact between them since the rescue. Captain, whatever happens, I want you to know that meeting you has restored my faith in the possibility of peace. Your brother would be proud of what you are attempting. Elena felt tears welling up in her eyes, but they were tears of determination rather than sadness. For the first time since Marcus's death, she felt like his sacrifice might have meaning beyond grief. Then, let's go change the galaxy, she said. Time to show both our peoples what's possible when we choose cooperation over conflict. As the resistance ships prepared to separate and begin their respective missions, Elena reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. She'd come to the Kepler-7 debris field looking for her brother and had instead found a future where his death could inspire life rather than more killing. The Ivory Dragon had chosen mercy over vengeance, and in doing so had shown Elena that even the deepest hatred could be transformed into hope for something better. Now it was time to find out if the rest of the galaxy was ready for that transformation. 6 days later, as news networks across human and Zephyrian space simultaneously broadcast the evidence of the conspiracy that had prolonged the war, Elena's ship hung in space above the Centauri colonies. The defense preparations were complete, the revelation was underway, and, in the distance, sensors detected the approach of the Imperial battle fleet. But, for the first time since the war began, that approaching fleet carried messages as well as weapons, communications from Imperial officers who had seen the evidence and were demanding new orders before proceeding with the attack. The conspiracy was cracking, and peace was finally becoming possible. The solitary Ivory Dragon had chosen mercy over vengeance, and, in doing so had helped change the course of galactic history. Sometimes, Elena realized, the most powerful weapon against hatred was simply the courage to extend compassion to former enemies. As the first reports of ceasefire negotiations began coming through the communications networks, Elena looked at Kira Th and smiled. They had both lost family to this war, but, in saving each other, they had found a way to honor those losses while building something better for the future. The war was ending, not through conquest or destruction, but through the simple recognition that former enemies could become friends when they chose understanding over hatred. It was, Elena thought, exactly what Marcus would have wanted.